Prairie,
Here.
Cole, Bonnie,
He's online. He's online.
Wasowski. Here. Weigel,
Here.
Whitney. Here. Wolf,
Here.
we have a quorum.
Perfect, thank you. Item number 2 is minutes from meeting of February 27th, 2023. Anybody have any changes or is there a motion to approve?
So
Moved by Crary, second by Whitney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
I
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item number 3 is PACE loan request, Countrywide Sanitation.
Thank you, Chairman Weigel, members of the Growth Fund Committee. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Kevin Hatcher. I'm the Business Development Officer at the Grand Forks Region Economic Development Corporation. I'm presenting you regarding the FlexPace loan request of $24,011 for Countrywide Sanitation. And we're also fortunate to have President of the business, Rich Bornovich, here. So just a little bit of background here. She's attending here. I'll provide an initial background of the request. Ms. Bornovich will come up, provide additional detail regarding the project and the company, and I'll follow with the loan details after she is done. So further background here, Countrywide Sanitation provides roll-off stationary refuse services for businesses, individual owners in Grand Forks area, and also within a 120-mile radius surrounding the Grand Forks area. Countrywide services include custom commercial hauling, residential hauling, and contracted demolition services. Two distinctive divisions include the refuse services and also the recycling services. The recycling operations have grown substantially for their operations and developed into a significant part of their business income. If you think about the growth funds portfolio, we really align our priorities with the value added, similar to the state as well. So the recycling aspect, the value added scope by discarding the recyclable material externally as a result of cleaning, sorting, and mailing. That's really where we envision this value added aspect within that portfolio. The current project includes implementation of the recycling operations in 2 additional communities north of Grand Forks, northern North Dakota, resulting in the need for more equipment such as trucks, steel recycled dumpsters, and carts. And this project will also be supported through hiring of 4 additional full-time employees. Now I invite Ms. Bornovich here to provide further contacts on behalf of Countrywide Sanitation.
Well, I think Kevin, hi, my name is Rachel Granovich with Countrywide Sanitation. I think most of you may know me through the sanitation hauling business. And as Kevin said, we are expanding our services going north to some of the smaller communities. And that would include for the recycling into the community's commercial, residential, and rural areas. And that would include trucks, the containers, and also larger compactors in our facility to handle those items. Again, we are going to hire more people. It's going to be more administration, operation, and truck drivers. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer that.
No questions? Thank you.
And just a little further on the loan details here. So we got a total project of $788,000. FlexPace subsidy requested is to reduce the interest rate from 7.75 to 2.75% on a $500,000 note from Choice Bank. This is to purchase the truck equipment and recycling carts and dumpsters Ms. Bornovich mentioned. The community portion, the Grand Forks Growth Fund amount is, like I mentioned, the $24,011. That'd be a 5-year deferred loan, leveraging Bank of North Dakota's grant portion of $44,592. The loan to value is calculated at 66.5%, and then is also secured through personal guarantee from Ms. Bornovich, and then also equipment lead on the equipment that's being purchased. And I open the floor for any questions.
Questions so far?
Me a comment. Thanks for Ms. Granovich for being here. Been in business for like 15 years under Countrywide here,
Yes.
roughly. Thanks for your ongoing investment in the region. Nice job on the write-up, Kevin. I don't have any.
Thank you.
It was a very clear write-up, but I think it's so Congrats on an expansion. That means good things for you.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
I'm excited to hear that. So.
I think it's also worth noting too, just the history that Countrywide's had with the growth fund. And I mean, obviously, this is exactly what Flex Place is for. So it's great to see. It's very, documentation is great. So nobody else has any questions. I move approval.
I'd second.
We have a motion by Crary, second by Wolf. I do have one question, maybe it's for Ms. Richards. I noticed one loan in 2017 was canceled. Is that, can you just maybe touch on that real quick?
Well, that was an expansion project that moved sites, right? You were starting to expand one location and then you moved to a different site completely. So not a problem, just a change.
That's correct. We were going to put an addition onto one of the facilities that we were at. And we shifted and we found something else. So that's
Perfect.
that's why that did.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, seeing no further comments, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to item number 4, flex space loan modification, Red River Potatoes.
Good evening, Chairman White, members of the Growth Fund Committee. Here before you with hopefully a pretty straightforward request. We back in the tail end of 2022, you approved a roughly $80,000 flex pay or pay subsidy routed to Red River Potatoes LLC. Between then and now, interest rates have gone up, so the buy down amounts has gone up. They're looking to close, so we've tried to accommodate their timeline and have sent the $80,000 that's approved out the door. We're just here asking for approval of the gap at roughly, I think it's 25,000 and change.
Perfect.
I can stand for any questions.
Mr. Curry.
I have a question more so just on, and maybe this is a BND type of question, but at what point can you lock, like if you're utilizing these programs, at what point can you actually lock that interest rate? Or that,
It depends on the lender. It's more to do with the lender and what rate they're going to lend the loan at, as opposed to B&D or us thing. Typically, when they move a little faster and then the interest environment that we've been in for several years before, it's not been an issue because it's just locking it in is less risky. This is one of the newer ones and one that's kind of was approved right at the front end of things changing, and then it just kind of has continued to change pretty rapidly. So I don't know that I have a good answer to that piece, other than I know it's more to do with the lender.
And then, so with that being said, if we're going the opposite direction, so, and again, maybe more of a, probably more of a commercial lender question, I suppose, if anything, but, something you say, well, everything that's going on with, SVB and whatnot, and who knows what the Fed's gonna do tomorrow, and if rates were to go down, so if they do, once we approve of it, I guess, do we need to go through the formal process if it goes the other direction and, hey, they're, actually, we're gonna delay 2 weeks because now the commercial lenders drop in rate, 0.5%, and then that changes ours. We have to go through this whole body, so I don't want to hold anybody up either.
No, we don't have to do that. The only reason we're back here is because it's more than you've approved. So that's the only reason we're here. When it goes under, it does go under sometimes for the exact amount we'll send out will be less than that.
Okay.
We send out the present value that B&D sends. So if the buy down goes down or the interest rate goes down, our portion goes down, and we only send what is required of us to B&D.
So just want to make sure we weren't holding anybody up on either direction for that matter.
Yeah.
Great.
We'll be due for policy and procedures updates, kind of on an ongoing basis here in the near future. And that's something that we kind of kicked around as, for exactly that purpose. So we're not holding anybody up. Is there a threshold above, if it's within 5% or some or 10, whatever it is of what this body's approved, or, is that something we could look at administratively doing? Obviously needs to be fleshed out more, but to your point, that's just something we're cognizant of.
Thank you.
Mr. Wolf.
Yeah, so Mr. Collins, you did a nice job explaining the banking piece and there that the bank adjusted the interest rate is what happened. And obviously we talked about it September, now it's March. So I'm questioning the timing of was there some type of delay for the closing?
So there was about from when they came through here to when we circled back and had our kind of initial consultation, it was about January or so. We had talked about around then, prepared loan documents at that time. Between approval and January, February, that was when that change had occurred. We went through and had prepared the documents and stuff, and we're working with them, and they're, of course, out in Fresno, the principals are, so trying to get the docs there and back and get all the things, moving parts organized. By the time we realized that the gap was so significant, that's kind of, I guess, that all the moving parts there in between those 2 months is what kind of led to that delay. And then, you know, like I said, between February and now is where we're kind of like, okay, well, we need to come back through here and get reapproved for that. So, in terms of other flex-based loans, it's not a terribly abnormal timeline. We've had some that have been, you know, 9 months, sometimes that come through, but.
But typically there, the rate is not changed.
Right,
Which is why it's
right,
different in this case.
exactly.
Has this been, so the B and D portion, has that been approved already?
Yeah.
The increase?
Yep.
So that has been,
Absolutely.
I don't have any other questions, thank you.
Perfect. Any motions, questions?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Whitney, second by Kamami. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item number 5 is loan modification request, Valley Tech Pros, Mr. Conlon.
Alrighty, here before, you may recall back in, 2020, 2021 or so, Valley Tech Pros or Down LLC received 2 loans from this body, a startup loan in 2020, and then a 2021 C-Run COVID response loan. So the business unfortunately just recently announced that it was closed up shop. So obviously we're working with the principals to figure out what a path forward looks like on both of the loans. And Lisa Johnson, who's here, I believe, for any questions you might have after I give this brief kind of context piece, she can stand for any questions. She came forward with a proposal, essentially, it laid out in your staff report as to how she'd like to move forward in covering these both loans. Just to briefly summarize the terms she kind of laid out, or actually I should highlight it. A startup loan, the first startup loan is unsecured. That was one of the few, or one of the last ones that didn't have that blanket UCC attached. It's only secured against the business. And then the C-Run loan that did have a personal guarantee attached. So with that in mind, the proposal laid out by Ms. Johnson lays out what she believes her and the other principals sort of can afford in line with that to pay back both the notes, both the unsecured one and the C-Run personally guaranteed one. Essentially for both loans, the proposal is to take the rest of 2023 to get caught up on the payments that they're behind. Then 24 and 25 to make half payments, essentially what those amount to 50% payments on what they're set to pay through those 2, and then have balloon payments in January 26th to ideally pay off all of them. That's an arrangement that she said she's comfortable with, she believes they can afford. And from our perspective, that's, you know, what we feel is a reasonable chance to recoup as much as we can anyway on both of these loans. One other brief point of context before I, kick it over to you guys for any questions from me or Lisa, would be just that the North Dakota Development Fund loan, which this was one of the last ones where we partnered with the development fund on the startup loans. Her proposal is to stay current on that through paying it off, which looks to be mid 2025. So it lines up sort of nicely with the balloon payment coming up in 2026 for us. So hopefully there's some funds available there for us there. So with that, happy to stand for any questions, or I know Lisa would be happy to provide any context or answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Mr. Conlon. Any comments, questions, concerns? It looks like a good plan. Thank you, Lisa, for being here today. I think that's important. You kind of noticed or noted in prior meetings. So, Mr. Wolf.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Ms. Johnson, thank you for being here, and laying out the proposal. It makes sense to me, just a few questions. So with this, because with the repayment source to get caught up, and then there's a balloon down the road, which is a good way to do these things. Will part of the business continue, or what's the repayment source? Or are there other sources of income, or why the balloon?
Right now, the plan is to close the LLC.
Mhm.
Dalton, who was the primary tech owner of the business, is, because of some health reasons, is no longer able to continue. I'm the primary source of repaying back the funds. We felt like this is a really good program, and I hope to see it continue in the future. And the funds were very helpful to us. We couldn't have gone through the COVID era without it. And I feel obligated to pay it back, even though I wasn't officially an owner of the business. My name is synonymous with Valley Tech Pros, and I was a partner with Dalton, so.
I appreciate that, and then again, so getting current, and then with the balloon, the intention at this point is, at that point in time, then just pay them off.
Yeah. That's the intention.
That's admirable for you being here, and it seems like a good plan to me, thank you.
Thank you.
I echo that as well, Ms. Johnson, and we appreciate the fact that you're willing to do that, given the fact that the business is closed and it doesn't sound like there's probably enough revenue and you're covering some of that probably out of your own personal funds. So, you know, we appreciate that on our behalf. So just know that we see that and appreciate that. And thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, is there a motion to approve this plan?
So moved.
Moved by Whitney, second by Crary. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item number 6 is updates and information only. Item 6.15 naming rights. Ms. Richards.
Yes, just some quick updates on past items. You may recall in January, you approved and then the JDA subsequently approved in February a process to issue a request for proposals for naming rights for this building. That went out with a deadline in early May, but we got no reasonable responses to that. Now that we've gone through the public process, we can just kind of entertain offers. However, that naming rights process was just for the building. We also have the opportunity to get naming rights on individual spaces. So that too will go through a public process. We're looking at different outreach options, but when it is time to approve that second RFP, that will come back to you probably within the next month or so. The next item is interim lease extension for the EDC, also in this building. Their lease expires in May. Since we're still kind of in turmoil in terms of getting lease terms and other arrangements for this building finalized through ADA, we've talked about just an interim extension to take them through the end of the year. The rent per se is not changing, but the proposal, and then Mr. Lund will take this to his board early next month, would be to assess the membership fee that we're looking at imposing on all users. So that's $150 per employee per month to kind of offset the cost of this very amenity rich building that doesn't have a lot of rentable square footage. So anyway, that is our proposal to have that as the interim price adjustment through the end of the year. Again, we'll come back to this group and the JDA for a full-blown lease renewal, probably late this fall. Last item on my update list is more on past due loans. You know, you have heard from mostly staff, but also from borrowers, Mobile Recon and Amy's Place. At our last meeting, we talked about setting a policy so that startup loan program borrowers who request a restructuring will be asked to go to the SBDC first. Amy's Place is now in that process, so she is working with them, and we hope that we'll have a more solid proposal next month. Mobile Recon is a little too big for SBDC, but we're also hoping for a more solid proposal from them next month. As you may recall, the owner spoke about a start engine funding campaign that is supposed to start generating revenue for him next month. So we'll see how that pans out. We'll be back before you then. So with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions on any of those updates, but that's the end of our agenda.
Any questions? Mr. Crary?
Thanks, Mr. Richards. So if somebody were to come along, I guess for first out, one for the naming rights, so technically went through the public process. So if somebody were to stop in tomorrow and they wanted to name it, they essentially would come back to the board to approve, doesn't have to go through another formal process, or what was that when you said? When they send the second RFP, or how does that work?
The second RFP will be for naming rights for individual spaces within the building.
Okay,
The first one just covered building naming rights. So once we have that public process
Just
for
open
either
now.
one, then we can accept proposals. Staff would still bring them to
Yeah.
you for approval, but we don't have to have that process with, we advertise for proposals and a deadline. It's just
formal process is done, now just pure negotiations whenever anybody were to come to the table.
for the building
For the building,
itself.
yep, not the conference rooms or anything.
Correct.
And then,
Mr. Bowman, go ahead.
so then once the term of that second RFP is up, then you'd be in the same state where someone could come up and present. Is there ever a point where your staff gets proactive and goes external and does outreach, or?
Well, that's given the pretty weak response to that initial
Yeah.
proposal. I mean, we had a great website with, virtual flybys and all that. But yeah, we're looking at some sort of contact list and getting Johnny Ryan, maybe the mayor involved, something a little more direct.
And actually of I don't know if this has been discussed or not, but in regards to any of the funds raised in that, we're not dependent on any of those. Essentially, that's more or less, I mean, for lack of a better term, gravy. It's not like those aren't earmarked to subsidize some of the build out, some of the costs or anything like that. That's essentially just additional income that the city can generate, essentially, correct?
We're looking at it more as operating revenue, not for the
Yeah.
actual fit up. Yeah.
Just making sure.
Can I ask a question on a different one of those bullets?
Sure.
So on the past due loan updates, you said that Mobile Recon was too big to go through that process. Who determined that they were too
Well-
big and what does that determine? Like, how did that conversation happen?
Well, I guess our conversation at the last meeting was for startup borrowers and a process to kind of formalize their restructuring request. We didn't talk about other borrowers. Typically, most of our loan borrowers are kind of beyond the SBDC stage, but in this case, maybe it wouldn't hurt.
I would like to make a recommendation that he do it anyways, given that he's past due. And I don't believe he's too big to go through that process.
Well, what we've seen from him, he could use a little.
So I would
Assistance.
recommend that we actually don't allow that decision to be his to make. If we're setting that policy as a board, then and it's up to Nicole to then decide from the SBDC to say, this doesn't work for our process and put that on Nicole rather than them deciding if they're too big. I'd rather have a policy and us stick to that policy.
Sounds good to me.
So
We can certainly direct.
Yeah, I think that.
whether or not he follows through is on him.
It's a
but-
good, I mean, for us, it's a policy, I think, to advise them, request them, require them to go to talk to the SBDC. I think it's a good process. The SBDC looks at a lot of different businesses, and if it's not in their wheelhouse or what they can do, they'll let them know. But I do think getting them involved under these circumstances it's a good thing. I would agree with you. So,
Well, and it would be good to have some semi-standardized process so that the requests that you see kind of follow a pattern rather than just.
I would just say that it was not required of them prior to taking the loan or anything along those lines. I find it hard to require them after the fact to go to something. I think if we're gonna look at that policy, then we should start from the very beginning and make everybody required. I think we'd be hard pressed to make them do it after the fact. I like where the idea is going, but I just don't know that that's feasible.
Yeah.
He hasn't actually he proposed a modification, but we're still kind of in limbo anyway, correct? Because if the crowdfunding goes well, theoretically, we're back on track next month.
Yeah.
Right, so then theoretically, so this, we're a little early anyway, but, right, we can keep our fingers crossed, but that was the intention.
yeah, I would say I agree with Chair Weigel I think that it should be twofold. I think it should be built into our process moving forward. If this happens, this is what you should do. But I would also agree that, or I guess feel that when a plan does not go according to the plan, that's a time to change the plan. And in this case, if not brought current by a certain point, I do think it's fair to say, we will extend this, could you please do this? And, so I think I'm somewhere in the middle. In that case.
And I think the reason for my thought process is, you know, you've got to a place where you're now past due. And we have an excellent community resource in our SBDC where they have the ability and the expertise around financial plans such as these, where if you need to redo your financial plan, I believe it's just a good way for us to provide them a connection to a community resource that could bring a proposal for a different type of way to come current on your loan by having another set of eyes that this is what they do, right? So that's, I think, why I feel strongly that, you know, saying it didn't go as planned. So now we're going to give you some support from a community resource that this is what they do. And they work with businesses at all different stages.
No, and I don't disagree, but I think we should do it from everybody from this point on then, right? Because we've had many businesses now come, shouldn't say many, we've had a few businesses that have come talk to us about payment plans and everything else that we're going to require or strongly encourage or suggest that one business does it, then we should be doing it for everybody. We don't need to be treating different businesses differently. So
Agreed.
that's our intent moving forward. I'm good with it, but I just think that should be outlined for staff to recommend. for other
We'll
businesses.
suggest it to Mr. Dowell and then going forward, but for the startup program, that was kind of the threshold. You can't even talk to us as a group until you've been to SBDC. So I see where you're going.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Whitney, second by Wolf. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.